The Oblivion remake slash remaster saga will finally be coming to a close with the official shadow drop and release of Oblivion Remastered next week. Ladies and gentlemen, this is probably one of the most exciting times for me because Oblivion is my game of all time. Now, first and foremost, because I'm sure a lot of you have already seen coverage of this or seen it through Twitter, it's completely blown up my feed. Yes, these leaks are real. I see people still going, oh, maybe there is some validity to these. It is. These leaks were taken directly from the official Virtuos website. Someone used the inspect tool, found a list of uploaded images that have all of the ones that we're going to be taking a look at. And on top of that, the website is now under maintenance. So either they're gearing up to just announce this thing today, which I hope, it's all out in the public. Just announce it, have some fun with it, throw out the trailers, get people excited, and then you can maintain your plan to release it next week. But honestly, let fans get hyped, and if there is some disparity between what's an old version, what's the new version, so on and so forth, you can clear all that out right up in the open, show people the high quality images of what this actually is. That might make a lot of folks feel better versus seeing them through these blurry screenshots that are available that we'll dive into. Or alternatively, they're just trying to make sure that the website is safe from any potential future leaks. But either way, these are legit. It is coming. How is it going, everybody? My name is DeMarco, and if you're into Elder Scrolls, Bethesda, RPGs, and all that type of stuff, consider sticking around. Would love to have you here. Now, I'm not going to go through a whole history of this journey that it's been leading up to it. I'm sure many of you have heard it multiple times before, but I do want to cover just some of the recent information that has led us to this point, because of course there has been a lot of back and forth as to, is it coming this week, next week? It was supposed to be revealed in January at one point, but then that never happened. So just getting into some of the most recent events, it did really start with Nate the Hate, who announced that the remake was coming sometime before June. Then we started seeing other insiders get in on this information where they narrowed the release date down to sometime in April. It was unsure of when that might be, but we kept hearing that it was going to be a shadow drop of some kind. Now, throughout April, that date has shifted around a bit, but now Jeff Grubb very recently has come out and said it is going to be released next week, which of course, all of the reports had in common that it was going to be sometime in April. We're simply running out of weeks in April for this thing to come out. It is interesting that this will be taking place the same week as Expedition 33, but those games are so different from one another, I really don't think they're going to have much competition. So I think it fully is possible that we might see this remaster release on Tuesday, April 22nd, to give both of those titles a little bit of breathing room. I think it would very much surprise me if they tried to throw both of them on a Thursday. That would be crazy. Some of the information we learned through these leaks, we do know that there's going to be a deluxe edition of this remaster. It also, we'll talk more about that, but there's one thing in particular that stirs me the wrong way. But we also learned that it's going to be releasing on PS5, Xbox, and PC, which most people generally speculated would be the case. But as someone who is pretty console agnostic, and I want you to be able to enjoy these games wherever you want to play them, I'm certainly looking forward to as many people getting their hands on this absolutely legendary game. I also would love to see if they incorporate haptics into this new remaster for the PlayStation 5 controller. It's a gimmick, but I like it a lot, so that would be pretty neat, especially because we do know there's going to be revamped stealth, revamped combat, and enemy reactions, as well as revamped archery in the game, which having that haptic feedback for pulling the bow back can really make it feel quite satisfying if you're using that PS5 controller. Now, jumping into the key art, I think it looks absolutely incredible, very aesthetically cool. We don't need to spend too much time there, but what was interesting was seeing the deluxe edition, which allegedly is coming with additional weapons, or maybe they're just weapon variations that you can find. We've seen Bethesda do that in the past with different armor sets, where through the Creation Club you are able to download the versions of armor that came through Elder Scrolls Blades, the mobile game. You could download those alternative armor sets. Maybe this is the same case here. I would hate to see that Bethesda is locking weapons from the game entirely. unless you buy the deluxe edition. That's a very dirty tactic to me, especially considering this is a remaster, not a full-on remake based on what they're calling it themselves. And we can actually see through some of the screenshots that is the case. Cities look pretty similar, locations look almost identical from the exterior, so that's a factor to consider. But the really weird thing to me was noticing horse armor being a part of the deluxe edition of the game. Of course, horse armor at this point in time being the absolute meme, the absolute joke in the gaming industry in some ways, that people blame for starting the modern practice of microtransactions as we see it today. So for Bethesda to once again lock that behind a premium edition of the game, what are you thinking? It's just not a good look, especially when Bethesda is trying to overcome a lot of people who still hold them as a very greedy company after Fallout 76, Wolfenstein Youngblood, which featured time savers in the game, and various other things that people were not happy Bethesda was trying to do. Now, before going down this rabbit hole too far, I fully do believe this is going to be expansion. So I think there's going to be horse armor in the base game. There's going to be, of course, plenty of weapons coming back from the original to this remaster. These are just additional things that you can get as part of the deluxe edition. Do I want to see a deluxe edition? No, I think it's ridiculous for a remaster of the game. But arguably the most exciting part is, of course, going to be some of the screenshots that have released. And I have to say, this is probably going to be one of the more controversial aspects. Now, I can summarize this really quickly, which is just preference. Some people, like myself, I prefer the more highly saturated look in fantasy games. I like that. Not in all of them, but in some of them, especially a game like Oblivion, because that's how I knew it. Others will prefer the more muted, gritty, darker tone that the remake is apparently going for. That's perfectly fine. There's no right or wrong answer, but I'm sure you're going to see plenty of discourse about this online, of what we're getting to see. And there is the caveat that some of these are probably actually older builds, potentially. I say that with some air quotes around them. And of course, looking at these screenshots, you could immediately see the impressive level of detail from the much further draw distance to the more realistic terrain. You have a lot more ruggedness to the hills in the background and the scale of the mountains and slopes. You can see ruins in the backdrop. There's a fort off in the distance to the left. Also want to call out that this ruin all the way back here may actually be the Wizard's Tower player home expansion as part of Oblivion, so likely every expansion, or unsurprisingly every expansion, probably going to be included here. And when I say that it looks a little bit as though this might be an older version, there is in fact a screenshot that's released where you can see the addition of more trees on the island there in the center, so different flora and fauna. Whether or not one is the final version, not sure which, but I'm assuming that this nighttime screenshot is much more accurate. And of course, this is all drastically overhauled lighting systems, and for those that aren't necessarily a fan of this look and style, I do firmly believe that this might be a result of the time of day. There's probably going to be much more contrast in the different times and in the different weather systems as well, more importantly, that would cause this lighting to appear a little bit more yellow versus a little bit more vibrant. And I say that because you can look at, for example, this screenshot here, which overlooks, and you can see the reds and the greens, and of course the sunset in the distance. Then if we look at a different time of day, you can see when we take a turn around at the exit to the Imperial Prison, the greens pop out a lot more here, and again, just enhancing that vibrancy. I do firmly believe time of day is going to have a much stronger difference in how we see the world of Oblivion, of Cyrodiil. Now, importantly, when we look at the fact that this is a remaster, not only is that what we get to see in the official cover art images for the game, but you can actually take a look at comparisons between here, for example, this Skingrad bridge, which is almost one-to-one. Of course, it's been upgraded, the scale is a lot more impressive. Or you can look at the city of Anvil, which when you see the angle that this screenshot is taken, the gate walls in particular in the back and the distance from this lake to the chapel there, when you look at the original 2006 release of Oblivion, they're very similar in terms of what appears to be the overall size of these cities. So in contrast to what Skyblivion is doing, where they are completely overhauling a lot of the cities to make them more lore accurate and more lore friendly than the original ever was. In this, you're going to get a much more faithful recreation to those original layouts. Now, while this screenshot in particular is incredibly difficult to see, Reddit users have pointed out that there is concern whether or not Shivering Isles and Knights of the Nine DLCs will also be locked behind this deluxe edition of the game. Again, I don't want to devalue the amount of effort that went from bringing a 2006 game into the modern age, but it's not a full-on remake, and I think some people will admittedly get stressed out about having to pay a higher cost for something that isn't relatively new other than the visuals. We of course don't know the extent of the changes just from screenshots alone. What is the voice acting going to be? Is it going to remain exactly the same, or did they completely redo all of those lines? Are quests going to remain completely unchanged, or maybe they added some new ones or updated some old ones? What about skills and leveling? Will it go more like Skyrim where it's just a la carte, or will you have distinct classes and major and minor skills, which honestly is my personal preference in Elder Scrolls? What are those changes going to look like? And while we're on the subject of unknowns, the biggest question mark being modability. How moddable will the Oblivion Remaster be? Is it going to release the mod tools like they have in the past? Because this is allegedly a hybrid of the Creation Engine and Unreal, and we don't know exactly what that looks like. Is it going to be as moddable? Will we see the same quality of mods as well? Things like Fallscar or Legacy of the Dragonborn that are done on the Creation Engine. We know that the Creation Engine has a hardcore modding audience, but will that transition over to all those folks who maybe don't want to spend the time learning Unreal? That remains to be seen. Ultimately, for some of those factors, the jury's still out, at least for me, right? You're going to probably have completely overhauled dungeons. I don't think this remaster can be successful if they don't overhaul the way that the dungeon interiors were made. They're just simply repetitions of one another. It's probably one of the most outdated aspects of Oblivion, and as much as I love that game, it is sort of hard to go back to it primarily for that reason, in my opinion, above all else. And lastly, I did want to bring up Skyblivion as well, right? Skyblivion is interesting because it's going for a much more, what I would say, faithful recreation of Oblivion. That includes the higher saturation, the more contrast that you can see, and then things like cities, for example, in Skyblivion are being completely overhauled, and that goes into the dungeons as well. Skyblivion team is remaking the dungeons to both the exteriors be built more lore accurate to the original, as well as the interiors make more sense based on the historical context of what these locations went through, whether it was a battle or a skirmish, so on and so forth. And so when we look at some of the locations with Oblivion Remastered, and we see that at least the exteriors are more or less one-to-one recreations, the cities look to be one-to-one, that I think will hold a lot of value for players to check out both experiences rather than just latch on to one. I have to say, ultimately, you look at some of these screenshots, such as this city here, Skingrad, and it looks like an Unreal game, right? Unreal just has this feel, this look and style to it that's sort of pervasive through a lot of the titles that get released using that engine. This is no exception, in my honest opinion, and some people are going to like that, and some people are going to hate that. There's a few key components here I think are very important. Look, at the end of the day, Oblivion Remastered, yes, there's two reasons I think this exists. One, because there's definitely an audience that is hungry for it, so it's a fan service project. It needs to fill that role as far as what's in the deluxe edition content, or is it cutting things out, that sort of thing. But additionally, the second reason is to help fill the gap between Elder Scrolls 6 and today, and this is a game that will help push players to both get introduced to the Elder Scrolls universe. If they haven't tried before, they can hop in with Oblivion, maybe they check out Skyrim, and then of course Elder Scrolls 6, probably, I want to say, within the next 2 years, which is an exciting time frame for Bethesda games, especially considering that this has been one of Bethesda's biggest struggle as of late. We do have the Fallout 3 remaster, which was also confirmed in those same documents. I made a video on this, you can check that out if you're interested, that maybe Bethesda can finally get their release cadence a bit on schedule. But that will be all for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you're interested in this remaster, stay tuned. I'll definitely be talking more about it in the coming days. So, with that said, I hope to see you all next time. So long, everybody.